All right, so it's Twist and Shout, and we are when we first did this list, this album was number 50, and it is on the best ever albums list of the 60s, and now it's moved down to 53. It was number 3 in 1963 and 431 of all time. It was released on March 22nd, 1963, and although the recording was technically from September 1962 through February of 1963. 10 of the 14 songs on this album were recorded in one session on February 11th, 1963. I've read different reports. It was really anywhere between 11 and 15 hours of recording. And they just laid down 10 of the 14 songs. The 4 songs that had already been recorded were singles. So it was Love Me Do with the B-side of P.S. I Love You, and then Please Please Me with the B-side of Ask Me Why were already released, and they were recorded earlier in the fall of 62.
Is that why John Lennon's voice sounds like it's about to like crack in half during Twist and Shout because the last song?
Yes, and we will get to that. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay, good.
So 8 of the 14 songs were Lennon-McCartney originals, and actually it's interesting that this is the only album that those songs are listed as McCartney-Lennon songs, and I don't know why that is. They were listed as McCartney-Lennon, and then every other song after that was listed as Lennon-McCartney, so I didn't really see a reason behind that, but it's of note. It was also listed in 2012 when Rolling Stone had their top 500 albums of all time, and when they redid the list in 2012, it was number 39, and then the most recent list that came out, it is not on at all. So it dropped at least 461 spots. So which just highlights kind of how drastically different that list is. But yeah, so. Quick, just to kind of leading up to this album. So Brian Epstein was the Beatles manager, and he became their manager about a year prior to this record being recorded. He had shopped the band around several times, and they got actually several rejections, including one label that was telling him that pop music and rock music is on its way out. I'm pretty sure that guy got fired a couple months later. So Epstein finally finds George Martin, who was a producer who worked for EMI, and Martin signed them in March 1962 to their Parlophone label. His first session with the band was in June of that year, and he didn't like their drummer because remember at that time it was Pete Best, and so he basically said, "You guys got to get a better drummer," and the Beatles were on their way outs with him anyway. So they ended up firing him. They hired Ringo, and they showed up later in September to record with him. But Martin had already called in another session drummer, Andy White. He didn't want to get burned by another bad drummer. So it's also interesting that on this record, the songs that they recorded that day, Love Me Do and P.S. I Love You, were Ringo was not on the drummer for those songs. It was Andy White. Ringo had to play the tambourine and the maracas. And I don't think he ever forgave George Martin. He always kind of held a grudge against George Martin for that. But so that's a little Beatles trivia for you. So they did release 2 singles, Love Me Do and then Please Please Me. They both did pretty well. They charted very well, especially Please Please Me, which was their first number 1 single in the UK. And that's when George Martin said, "All right, guys, let's get together. Let's record an album. What do you got?" And they just said, "Let's just record what our stage act is right now." So they originally thought that they might record it at the Cavern Club, but they thought, which was the club that the Beatles were playing in Liverpool, but they thought better of it, and they just decided to record in Abbey Road, which they did. And yes, it was done in one session, one long session. Lennon not only, John, yes, they did sing Twist and Shout last because he knew that he was going to be tearing his vocal cords on it, but Lennon recorded this album with a cold. He had a pretty bad cold that his throat was doing poorly to begin with, so he had to suck lozenges and drink milk all day to kind of help soften and soothe his voice. And yeah, they did all those songs, and they closed with Twist and Shout, and they did that in one take. They tried to do it a second time, but Lennon's voice was clearly gone. So what you hear on that classic song is that one take after 10 to 14 hours of recording. And George Martin was quoted as saying, "I don't know how they do it. We've been recording all day, but the longer we go on, the better they get." And so this essentially is just them doing they needed an album, and this is them doing their stage act with a couple of singles that were already released. It did hit the top of the UK charts and remained there for 30 weeks before being replaced by their second album with the Beatles. And this is the first non-soundtrack album to spend more than 1 year year in the UK top 10 charts. It was on that chart for 62 weeks. So this was quite a shock to the establishment, because really the stuff that was selling the most were like music soundtracks and play and musicals and things like that. So that's about all I got on the bio here. So Beatles' first album, what do we think about it? Let's start with you, John.
Oh, it's like candy. You know what I mean? It's a great album, and especially in the context of when it was released in 1963. When you think of it from that, I'm sure it was a remarkable album to listen to in 1963. This is one of my favorite Beatles albums, although I wouldn't necessarily say it's one of the best Beatles albums, because it is a lot of covers. It almost sounds like a girl group album recorded by the Beatles. Which is not a negative thing, all the way down to them inexplicably doing the song "Boys" that Ringo sings. I still
that's an odd one, isn't it?
Always thought that was such an interesting
song.
choice. More power to them if they're trying to make it as like a transgressive statement, but it's weird. I'll also say that to me, and this may be heresy to some people listening, the John Lennon songs with vocals are just way better on this track, way better. And I know that, takes out Love Me Do and, gosh, I'm trying to think, like,
he sings on Love Me Do.
Taste of Honey. No, I'm saying the McCartney songs are Love Me Do, A Taste of Honey.
Are you talking about the ones that he wrote?
Yeah, that he sang. I'm saying not so much wrote. I'm thinking singing, because most of the songs on this album were Lennon leads.
Yeah, he did. McCartney did. I Saw Her Standing There. He sings on that.
I Saw Her Standing There, yeah, which is a great song. So I that may counter my argument. But for the most part, like, I love the song Chains. I love the song, which is actually George Harrison singing. It is,
yeah.
Yeah.
I like that song too.
It's his first song that he ever sang lead on.
Yep. And what's the other song Harrison sings on this?
He sings, the second one he sings on is Do You Want to Know a Secret, which was mostly a Lennon composition. And oddly enough,
that was the Lennon song, yeah.
That was the most successful song sung by George Harrison until Something in 1969.
Wow.
So all those years, yeah, it took Something for him to really do better, to have a more successful song that he sang lead on.
Do better, George.
Yeah.
But yeah, Anna Go to Him, which is a definite Lennon song. And he sings in too, I think, by himself with no McCartney. I love that song. I love Chains. I love
Anna Go to Him was a cover, John.
It was a cover, right? But I'm saying Lennon's singing it. Like,
right.
It's and also like lyrically, it's the type of song that Lennon would write. Mm-hmm. I think even now, I know that they talk about Lennon. We did Beatles for Sale, and they talked about Lennon getting more of his Edge and his Dylan period, but you could already see in terms of what songs Lennon is singing, what constitutes a Lennon song and what constitutes a McCartney song, even when they're picking the covers, can't you? Because the McCartney songs are always a little bit sweeter, and the Lennon songs are always a little bit more nuanced and harder edged. But salty. Yeah, there's singles. There's singles all over the place, like Please Please Me, Love Me Do. I'd talk about the instrumentation, but it's pretty straight. Once again, just like the first, it's pretty straightforward. There's harmonies, there's lead and bass guitar and rhythm guitar, hand claps like girl
harmonica.
Groups.
Let's not forget the harmonica.
Right, harmonica. Yep.
Mouth organ, Josh. It's the mouth organ.
Mouth organ. Sorry.
Is that different?
No, that's what the Brits called it. I think.
Okay.
That's what Lennon called it anyway.
Depends on who's doing it, Josh. I believe. Yeah. And so. I don't really know what to expand on right here, and I'm sorry for sounding so non-nuanced in my conversation, but it's a great pop album. It's a spectacular pop album in the context of its time. You can put this on at any time. I know this album extremely well because I've listened to it about 100 times at different times or another, and the replayability is 10 out of 10. So easy recommend. The Beatles would do certainly a lot more complex stuff than this, and especially middle period Beatles would take some of what this sound was and make it a little bit better. But you can't really go wrong with this album.
Yeah, right on.
I thought this was a really strong debut album, and I liked it better than the other two albums that we've talked about already. I think the strength of this album is the originals of the songs, and I think there's less covers on here than those other two albums that especially that one that had a lot of also almost
with the
half
Beatles
covers.
was pretty much all covered.
I think it actually might be. It's similar. If it's more originals, I wouldn't say that it's too much more because they all had their fair share of covers. But
okay, well, I guess maybe the strength of the original songs just steamrolled over those covers for me because I didn't really mind it much. I thought Misery and Chains were great, like deeper cuts of the Beatles. And I'm seeing that Chains was written by Geffen and King. Is that correct?
That was another CTS Legends.
yeah.
CTS Legend, Geffen and King.
And that's a great cover. I love that song. Yeah.
Really
that's my favorite song on the album. Please Please Me is a close second.
I mean, the fact that they had, I Saw Her Standing There, Please Please Me, Love Me Do, and Twist and Shout on this album is, I mean, no wonder they were who they were. It's kind of hard in some respects to think like that there was nothing else like them out there. It's you think of the Beatles, and the Beatles are always there for us, but for that back then, this was like a fresh new sound, right? And it just kind of blows my mind.
If you were not listening to black music, yes, then they must have been. But if you were, and I think the Beatles would be the first to mention it. You know what I mean? That they took some of that music and presented it to a larger audience.
Oh yeah.
So I do want to contextualize that. That's not to take away from the Beatles' brilliance, but they didn't come out of like a total
vacuum.
Vacuum. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And so it's really hard. I did find that Ringo song really funny. The Boys. It's just a weird like outlier on the album. It
had to have been recorded originally by like a girl group or
the
like
Shirelles.
Okay, there you go. I was gonna say it's got to either be a late 50s like female singer or a girl group, because an early girl group, not like
why did he
Supremes.
choose to sing that though? I mean,
so and that's because and John, you said, well, maybe there was like a play on something, or they were trying to make
transgressive, to knock down like norms.
McCartney is quoted as saying, quote, "Any one of us could hold the audience. Ringo would do Boys, which was a fan favorite with the crowd, and it was great. Though if you think about it, here's us doing a song, and it was really a girl song. I talk about boys now, or it was a gay song, but we never even listened. It's just this great song. I think that's one of the things about youth. You just don't give a shit. I love the innocence of those days."
Now he's British, so did he mean gay in the literal form or in like the?
I think it could have been taken either way, but
either way, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think I think that his quotes are just saying it was a fun song. We didn't think about the context of that, although they did change the words, because it says I think the first line is like, "My girl says when I kiss her lips." They changed that because the Shirelles' voice version is "My boy says when I." So they did invert one of the parts of the song.
They didn't want to be too gay, just a little bit gay.
Well, then I thought, well, maybe they're just, this is Ringo. Think this is like them. Here, Ringo, you sing this song. And before Ringo, they had
like
played
trolling
the song for
him,
a while.
kind of.
Yeah, but Pete Best used to sing this too when he was the drummer. But so it was a drummer sang song. And then I was like, well, maybe they're just saying, "Hey, Ringo, if you want to join the band, you got to sing this song about boys and say it like you mean it." But in the background,
actually makes a lot of sense.
But in the background, they're all going, "Yeah, boys." So they're egging it on. They're all part of it too. So that doesn't really make any sense. But yeah, McCartney just kind of said, "It's a great song. We sang it. Who cares? Whatever." So
yeah,
I would say
at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. But
yeah, it doesn't, and good on them for being comfortable in their own skin. But I will say, "Please Please Me" and "Love Me Do" are probably two of the best examples of Lennon and McCartney harmonies, and they're right next to each other. And it's funny because they're inverted. Because I think Lennon takes the lead with McCartney kind of in the background part in "Please Please Me," and then they reverse in "Love Me Do," and that's a really cool 2-song set because you really get to hear the layering of their voices and just flipped. So that's tracks 7 and 8, and I think one ends side 1 on one, if I remember reading it correct, and then starts side 2 on the other. So that would be that's really cool stuff. So those are great songs.
Yeah, no, I of course love this record, and I think that so far that the Best Ever Albums is getting the order right, as far as I would put it, right? I would say With the Beatles is probably my least favorite record, and then I'd say Beatles for Sale, and then I would probably put this. So far I think they got it, but this is, Yeah, I would say that this is a jump up for me from those last two. Like it's not only I like it better, I like it considerably better. I think as an overall whole, it's just the energy is so palpable in this record, and this is
the opposite of Beatles for Sale, isn't it?
Yes, this is them. This is them showing what they did best at that time. Just putting on a really great show. A lot of positive, and the energy is just all over the place. I don't know. I love the covers. I agree. I think Chains is great. I think Twist and Shout is classic, right? I mean, people hear that song and it's like you never even know what it sounded like prior to the Beatles doing it, because that was been their most successful song. And actually, that song had a resurgence in 1986 because it was probably one of the things that catapulted Matthew Broderick's career, and because it was on Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and then like the next week. What was that Rodney Dangerfield movie, Back to School, came out? Yeah. And so I got to say, Matthew Broderick does a much better John Lennon than Rodney Dangerfield does, because Matthew Broderick in that movie, it's like perfect John Lennon, to the point where they probably actually just played it. But Rodney Dangerfield actually sings it in his voice. But that made it back into the charts. The song hit the charts in the 80s as a resurgence of that. So I thought that was kind of funny. But no, it's a great record. And another interesting tidbit. So Taste of Honey probably might be my least favorite song on this.
Yeah, I didn't like that song.
It was originally an instrumental for a play of the same name, but then they eventually made it into, I don't know if they did a musical, but then they started putting vocals behind it. Do you know who the first vocal performance was performed by? Never guess this.
Of the Beatles? Like who did, or the original artist?
No, the original. No, well, I guess you could say it was the original artist. I mean, he didn't write it or anything like that, but he performed it. A Star Wars fan's favorite, Billy D. Williams.
What?
Wow.
Billy D. Williams sang this, and it's like a totally different version. It was later redone by some dude named Lenny Welch, and that's the one that's most like the one that you hear on the record.
Well, it goes back to what I was saying, that the Beatles were primarily covering black music. I mean, Twist and Shout, the Beatles version is fantastic, and probably in many ways is the version, but that's an Isley Brothers song originally.
It was actually
Isley Brothers,
the
right?
first. There's a little story that it was first performed by a band called the Top Notes. With King Curtis and the Cookies. So King Curtis we talked about last week.
Yep.
And it was produced by Phil Spector. But the writer, one of the writers, a guy named Burt Burns, did not like Spector's production.
Okay.
Yeah, Burt Burns. He didn't like Spector's production, and he felt that he basically ruined the song. So then he took it to the Isley Brothers, and they were the ones that made it popular, and that was what this version was really based on. So
imagine thinking that you're like going to outproduce Phil Spector. By the way, I mean, at the time, it probably didn't mean anything because he was just getting started. But
right,
it's kind of funny in hindsight.
Yeah, but
Phil Spector, he's not going to have much of a career.
No, well, he doesn't anymore.
Fair enough. Yes.
So I love this album. I agree, Josh. I think Misery is that's a great deep cut. That's a Lennon McCartney original. It's also the first Beatles song to ever be covered by anybody. Some dude named Kenny Lynch covered it. Actually, I think they originally wrote it for somebody else. They wrote it for this woman, Helen Shapiro, who was one of Britain's most popular female singers at the time. But I guess her manager didn't feel it was right for her, so they ended up recording it themselves, and then I guess Kenny Lynch covered it as well. But great record, high energy, high recommend. I'm trying to think of what really. I think the 1-2 punch of I Saw Her Standing There and Misery are really great ways to open it. Mm-hmm. They got some great covers on here with Chains, with Twist and Shout. Baby It's You is a great song too. That was another Shirelle. That was actually performed by the Shirelles as well, John. So your assumption of this sounds like kind of like a girl group, type songs. That was definitely true. But yeah, man, this is just the beginning for them. But very fantastic record. So
great. Yeah, if you haven't listened to this record, go seek it out. It's great.